Hello, everyone, and welcome to another ISACA Live. I'm Paul Phillips, the Director of Event Content Development, and I'm excited to welcome our guest for today, Dr. Aadeel Akhtar, a neuroscientist who is also a founder and CEO of PSYONIC, which is revolutionizing prosthetic limbs. But before we do that, I want to make sure you guys get in to our live. Feel free to ask questions. Let us know where you logging in from. We would love to hear from you. We have a number of questions we want to ask Dr. Aadeel, and we hope we'll have time to take some of your questions as well. Now back to our guest. Dr. Aadeel is a featured speaker at ISACA 2024 North America Conference, which is taking place this year, May 8th through the 10th in Phoenix, Arizona, and it would also be virtual. He is speaking in a general session about the advances and risks associated with AI-powered bionic limbs. He is also participating in a panel discussion with other tech executives talking about trends as well as predictions in the emerging technology industry. So we will spend the next 20 minutes or so previewing his keynote topics and sharing some insights on what 2024 will have in store for AI, if you will. So again, if time permits, we will be asking questions. So let's get started. Dr. Akhtar, welcome to the conversation. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. And I'm super excited about the conference as well.
Yeah, we are looking forward to having you. You and I have spoken many times before, so I feel like we're old friends. This will just be a conversation, if you will. We want to get to know you, and then we want to allow you time to kind of preview, not only talk about you and your company, which you guys are doing some amazing things, but then I want you to kind of preview your keynote presentation without giving away everything. So first, let's talk about you. Why don't you introduce yourself and explain how you got to where you are and why you have a passion for doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. And so I'm Dr. Aadeel Akhtar. I'm the CEO and founder of PSYONIC, and we develop advanced bionic limbs that are accessible for both humans and robots. And I've been wanting to do this ever since I was 7 years old. My parents are from Pakistan, but I was born in the Chicagoland area. And I was visiting Pakistan when I was 7, and that's the first time I met someone missing a limb. And she was my age, missing her right leg, using a tree branch as a crutch. And that's what inspired me to go into the field. So I went to Loyola University of Chicago. I got a bachelor's in biology there, a master's in computer science. I taught there for a couple of years. And then I went down to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, got another master's in electrical and computer engineering, PhD in neuroscience. And then I left medical school to do this full time because this was more fun. But while I was doing my PhD, we got the chance to go down to Ecuador, where we were working with a nonprofit organization known as the Range of Motion Project. Their whole mission is to provide prosthetics to those who can't afford them in the US, Guatemala, and Ecuador. And this is a part of a much longer story of 2 weeks of all-nighters and trying to get like an early prototype of our hand working. But our very first patient that we ever worked with, Juan Suquillo, he had lost his left hand 35 years prior due to a landmine explosion. He was in the Ecuadorian army, and it was a border war between Ecuador and Peru. And he made a pinch with his left hand for the first time in 35 years. And in front of international news stations, he said he felt as though a part of him had come back. And that's when I realized that if I stay in academia, this just ends up as a journal paper. If we want everyone to feel the exact same way Juan did, we had to commercialize our technology. And so that's when PSYONIC was born. And so we went back to the States. We raised like a pre-seed round. We're in the middle of a seed round right now. We've got over 200 patients using the hand in the US, as well as like 50 robotics researchers worldwide, including NASA, Meta, Mercedes-Benz, most of the humanoid robot companies, Aptronic, Figure, etc. And we've just really been expanding. Our biggest issue is that we've got more demand than we can produce, so we're trying to scale up our production, and we're just really excited to usher in a new era of bionic limbs that work for both humans and robots.
Awesome. That's pretty amazing. And you referred to the hand. Is that what you have in your hand? The hand?
That is exactly right. So I've got our ability hand that I have right over here. And so if I was missing my hand, most commonly I would use two muscle sensors to control it, but I've got these two buttons here so I can open and close it, right? I can switch to different grips. So for example, I can do a pinch. This is the fastest hand on the market, but we can also control the speed of it. So if you flex your muscles lightly, we can go very slowly, or we can go very quickly as well. But also if you're at a rock concert, you can rock on. And our user favorite is the finger wave, where you can see all the fingers moving.
That's a pretty amazing. So that's what we call, your company produces psionic AI-powered bionic limbs. Did I get that right?
Exactly. That's right. That is
Excellent.
right.
So let's talk about AI for a second, because everybody's talking about AI, right? So help us understand. You're a professional, you're an expert in this area. So I guess I have a pretty general question as to, how do you see AI revolutionizing the world, if you will, or do you even agree with that statement?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, so that it's been it has revolutionized the world on so many fronts, right? I mean, like we just saw last year, in the last 2 years, we've seen like DALL-E and ChatGPT come out of OpenAI, and that was just huge for doing like these transformational models, right? That you can just take generic inputs, just like natural language, and then get a response back that's also in a natural human language, right? So that was that's been huge, right? A lot of people are already using that in their workflows and generating code, like in generating like documents and things like that. And even on like we see self-driving cars, right? There's a lot of AI involved in that. And even on the healthcare space, right? Doing like automated diagnosis of like things like breast cancer. And that was actually what I did an internship, maybe like 10, or no, it wasn't an internship. I was actually working at the University of Chicago about like 10 or 12 years ago. And one of the things that we were working on then was like these neural network models for taking an X-ray of like a mammogram, right, and diagnosing breast cancer from it. And even then, it was actually outperforming many radiologists too. So we're seeing this trend of going towards AI that can really help and benefit humanity. And for our hand in particular, the way we use AI and the way it's used in prosthetics is that it's used to recognize the muscle signals, the intent of the human in order to control this hand the way you want it to, right? So if we have a bunch of muscle sensors around your arm, the idea is that how do we go from what we're trying to read from your muscles to what the hand should be doing? And so we basically are training these machine learning models to detect, like, if you're trying to move your fingers with these muscles, then how do you actually get the hand to move that way? And that's kind of how AI is helping in our field specifically, how we can control these bionic limbs.
So you mentioned, bionic limbs, self-driving cars, you mentioned ChatGPT, helping diagnose cancer, a lot of different benefits as it relates to AI, which is pretty powerful. In your mind, what are some of the risks associated with AI?
Yeah, and there are risks associated with AI in particular. I mean, if we use like the self-driving car example, one of the like archetypal examples are of like, if the car gets into an accident while you are in self-driving mode, like whose fault is it, right? Is it the issue of the driver itself, or is it the issue of the AI? Like, where do you kind of draw that line? In the same way, we can eventually see some of those issues like creeping up in like the bionic limb space, right? If you start to rely on the AI to do all the hand control, right? If it causes harm to the user or to someone else, then where does the responsibility lie, right? Is it on the coding? Is it on the AI itself, or is it on the user? Is it on the programmer who programmed the AI? And these are all ethical considerations that 10 years ago these didn't exist, right? And so we're heading into this world where we see these immense benefits, but also at the same time there are all these risks and ethical considerations that we need to take into account as well. Like, also, if we're collecting all of this data, right? So all of this data is necessary in order to get the most accurate models so that you can get the best control of your hand, you can get the best control of your self-driving car. But there's privacy issues concerned with that, right? You don't want your data being leaked to like, millions of people so that they can see like, your driving habits, or like where you're going, or for example, like what your muscle signals, your neural signals are like, or your sensory feedback patterns that you're getting from the hand, right? So all of those have to be taken into account when you're building these systems, and it's such an exciting time that these questions are even like coming up that we would never even thought of so many years ago.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, there are benefits, there are risks, and again, questions that are coming up. So I promised you that I would go off script. So here's my chance. Because there are risks and there are benefits, how do organizations like yourself accommodate for those risks? What are some of the things you do to respond to risks?
Yeah, and so there's a lot of things that we can do. I mean, so from the technical side of things, right? We make sure that we're encrypting things, right? So like our communication is encrypted, that like we're using like proper hardware that allows for like doing things like that to keep like data secure. And then we've got protocols in place for like keeping like data private, and everything like that too. And so those are kind of like more on the technical side of how we can protect against like AI doing those things. The other thing is that, and this is something that's kind of unique and interesting to rehabilitation for many years, right? And especially when we look at a lot of the technology that's been in like stroke rehabilitation for like the last 20, 30 years. And a lot of times you'll see these exoskeletons, right? So you can go to a hospital, you might see like an exoskeleton that's helping to rehabilitate the user. Like if they lost use of their arm, for example, after a stroke, then you've got this like giant robot arm that helps train you, right? But the question is how much autonomy do you give to the robot, like the robot doing the actual work, or the human itself, right? And it has to be this balance. It has to be this balance between motivating the human enough to regain that neural function so that they can regain like control of their own arm without having to rely on the robot, but also giving enough autonomy to the robot to provide assistance when it's needed, right? And so in our case, we're always considering those questions too, and we want to make sure that the human is always the one who's in control, right? That they're able to stop the hand when they wanted to, and then like reprogram it however they want to. They have full control of how their hand will work.
Got it. So, and it's funny, I'm going to ask a question that's going to sound a little silly, because piggybacking off what you just said, you want to make sure the human is always in control. So I'm sure you're familiar with Will Smith movie, The I, Robot, that took
Absolutely.
place. Is that a possibility? Is that a real scenario that could happen?
I think we're still a long ways away from like artificial general intelligence. And so I don't think there's going to be necessarily any robot uprising soon, but it is something to consider in particular, especially with the idea of like weaponizing robots, right? I mean, like humanoid robots. And I feel like, this goes for any technology, right? I mean, like the internet has like, it was such an incredible way to help people communicate with each other much more rapidly, but also it helped proliferate, the dark web and things like that, and like illicit dealings and things like that. So there's always like these pros and cons to any new technology that comes out, right? So same thing with like humanoid robots. There's going to be pros and cons to those technologies, right? So pros being like, it can really transform like, manufacturing and the quality of life for humans, and like, care for the elderly and things like that. But at the same time, they can be weaponized, right? They can become soldiers and things like that too, right? So I think having proper legislation on that and making sure that we're accounting for these things and asking these questions now before it's too late, I think that's going to be very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's get into your presentation. You are one of our keynote speakers at our upcoming conference that's taking place, as I said before, in Arizona, starting May 8th through the 10th. You will be speaking on Friday morning, May 10th. So without giving everything away, talk to the audience give us a preview of what you will be discussing.
Yeah, so we're going to be showing a lot of the cool ways that our users and our robots have been using our bionic hand, and a lot of the cool applications where AI has really, really benefited our users. And, we were just talking a little bit ago about one of the videos we just released on our YouTube channel, which is a day in the life of one of our users, Annika Berlin, where she's doing like insane, amazing things that we didn't know were even possible with bionic limbs like 10 years ago. Like she went to the gym, she was doing pull-ups, she was flipping pancakes, she was golfing, she was paragliding with a bionic hand, right? And again, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you couldn't imagine doing these things with a bionic hand. And then on the robotics side, I mean, like NASA is using our robot, right? And they're put it on a humanoid astronaut robot that they eventually want to send into space. And the idea there is that you'd be on Earth controlling the robot, and it would be on the International Space Station, and eventually the Moon and Mars, and it'd be able to control all of these things, that these buttons, knobs, levers, switches like that you might find on the International Space Station. And so it's going to be really showcasing the incredible like benefits that you can get, but also then discussing what some of these risks are that I was mentioning too of things that we do need to be concerned about with like privacy and like how much you rely on the AI to control your hand and everything.
Awesome. Wow. I am looking forward to that presentation. Hopefully everyone that's listening can join us. And then you're also going to be joining a panel right after your presentation, which we're calling Conversations with the Chiefs. And we're going to be talking to CEOs and CIOs and what have you on that panel, and discussing, what are some of the trends that you just mentioned already, self-driving cars and Chat GPT. And we're going to also be asking you, what are you guys' predictions? Is the movie iRobot, is that coming down the line, and probably some more professional questions, if you will. So we're certainly looking forward to your presentation. I know that the EU is working on an AI Act, which I think is going to be, they plan to implement that or enact that late next year. So I want to get your opinion on, is that something you think that the United States should consider doing, creating some type of a national AI Act, if you will?
Yeah, I think that's going to be necessary in going forward as well, too, especially when we're talking about some of these risks, right, that might happen with AI later down the line. I think it needs to be addressed at a national level in order to make sure that, that we don't run into like these huge problems that we can't like go back on later on, like massive data leaks and things like that. Yeah, I think that's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and interesting. So, what would you say to the individual that is concerned that is going to be too restrictive, if you will? And would you view that as something that could potentially be restrictive to your organization?
And that's definitely possible. And I think it's a little bit early to tell, right? What the legislation needs to look like, right? It's going to have to be a balance between, being able to not restrict too much, like the abilities of what users are able to do. And so in our case in particular, I mean, for us, I feel like the users are still mostly in control, right? Like of the bionic hand and things like that. And we're using their data specifically just to train our models in order to like get the hand function to work the way they wanted to, right? Where I think that it might become, where it could become too restrictive is that if they don't allow you to use data, but then that wouldn't be the case, because then that would just kill AI in general, right? So,
Right.
so I think this is going to be like a dialogue between each, and basically like a case by case basis, right? Because it's such a new field. There's so many applications of this. You can't just make one blanket like legislation that works in everything, right? So it's going to be over the course of many years, as it is with any new technology, any new field. When the internet came out, right, that needed to be like regulated and things like that too, right? So I think it's going to follow the same trends that we saw for like all of those revolutions that we've seen in the past, like the automotive industry, the telecommunications industry, IT, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a former auditor and security professional myself, one of the things that I would recommend, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is recommend that organizations start preparing now. meaning get your house in order, make sure that there are policies and procedures in place, that you are doing some of the things that you've already mentioned, that there are protocols in place to ensure the data is protected, that you have encryption and other technologies in place, and to ensure that things are, again, like we used the word many times, protected, if you will. Because it is my assumption that that's what that law is going to cover, is to make sure that the risks that are associated with this technology are mitigated through policies, procedures, technologies, and what have you. So I guess my question, and this will be my last question to you, is how would you recommend an organization like yourself and others prepare for what we think will probably be a national regulation? Probably won't take place for another a year or two, but what are some of the things that they can do to prepare?
Yeah, and I think some of it is to follow what a lot of the EU is doing, right, and follow what a lot of the other companies have been starting to do on these with respect to these things like that. Like, and you mentioned a couple of them, as we said, like, making sure that things are encrypted, making sure that there's policies in place. And I think part of it is also what we're going to be doing at the conference, right? Having a group of people in this space to discuss these things, so that we can bounce ideas off of each other, and so that we know, like, going forward, like, what are the issues across all these different fields, and how can we move forward together?
Yeah, I love that answer, because that's exactly what we're going to be doing at the conference. There will be rooms full of privacy professionals and auditors and security professionals. And one of the big topics that we will be discussing and educating each other on is AI and machine learning and what have you. So I love that answer. One of the ways to prepare is to educate yourself. So that's a great answer. So, Doc, and I call you Doc because we're old friends now. I just happened to hear you speak a few minutes ago. We both went to the same university to get our master's degree, although I was probably 2 or 3 years only before you. It has been a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to your presentation on May 10th. And parting words for our audience, what would you say?
I think that the future is going to be very, very exciting, and I know that there's a lot of risks that come along with that too. But I truly believe that the benefits are going to outweigh the risks on all of this technology. And with what we've been able to accomplish with our bionic hand, this is just the beginning of all the revolutionary things that we're going to be doing. So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone at the conference.
Great. Thank you, sir. And thank you for your time. Let's wave with the hand.
Take care.
Thank you.